Hello, and welcome to the Thyroid Pharmacist Healing Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Izabella Wentz, and today we're going to be diving deep into the gallbladder, fatty liver, and thyroid connection with Olivia Haas. Welcome, Olivia. It's so great to have you here with us.
Thank you so much for having me here and spreading more education about gallbladder health. I really appreciate it.
Of course, my pleasure. A lot of women with thyroid issues seem to have gallbladder issues, and the two go hand in hand. Some of them have their gallbladder is already removed. And so that's another component that I would love to talk about. Before we get started, I'm going to let everybody know a little bit about you. So, Olivia is a passionate about empowering individuals on their gallbladder journey to lead healthier lifestyles so that they can live a long, happy, and fulfilling life with or without a gallbladder. As a gallbladder and fatty liver nutritionist, her goal is to give people resources and sources, whether they're working to save their gallbladder, transition well through surgery, or improve health months to years post gallbladder surgery. She has Masters of Science in Integrative Science. She's board certified nutritionist and certified nutrition professional. She became passionate about all things health and wellness from her own personal health struggles. Being diagnosed with hypothyroidism in her early 20s, she was given a choice to take several different medicines or change her lifestyle. She left the doctor's office that day and focused on changing her lifestyle. She became obsessed with learning how to heal herself naturally. Not always a smooth road, and unfortunately, Olivia developed gallbladder disease years later. Again, she made the choice to heal herself naturally and has prevented gallbladder surgery to this day. A healing journey is difficult at times, but rewarding in the end. Olivia's struggle became her blessing, and today she works with individuals working to save their gallbladder, reverse fatty liver, or improve health without a gallbladder. So, thank you so much for doing the work that you're doing. I discovered your I discovered your Instagram handle, Gallbladder Nutritionist, and was really excited about the information that you were sharing because, like I said, this is a struggle that so many women are faced with, and a lot of times they're told that they just need to remove their gallbladder. What were some of the symptoms you were experiencing on your journey?
I struggled. I did not realize it was like gallbladder liver related for so many years, but I have always struggled with chronic constipation. And whether it was related to low thyroid function or other factors, but I struggled with chronic constipation. And what happened was going into my 30s, I think there was stress, some hormonal shifts going on. And I was working with a functional practitioner at the time, and she started putting me on a candida protocol and suggested I go a little bit higher fat. So this is when I started doing like an ancestral based diet. I was eating a lot of raw meats, a lot of game, or a lot of like wild game protein, and was eating higher fat. Initially, I felt good, it like reduced down the bloating, but then the constipation got so bad. And I didn't realize it at the time, and the practitioner never really addressed it. And I just kept going with the constipation. And unfortunately, 6 months into that, we had 2 trips back to back. And I think it was just kind of like a compounding effect. I started developing gallbladder attacks. So, looking back on my journey, I always struggled with intolerance to fats and then constipation and bloating. I always had the signs of gallbladder liver stool, where it was like sticky, floaty, all those things, light colored, but I didn't know at the time. And then so it was like I didn't catch these early signs until it kind of became too late. And then I started dealing with obviously the back to back gallbladder attacks. And typically, I think with most individuals with gallbladder or even fatty liver dysfunction, kind of the early warning signs to catch is those intolerance to fats, whether it's gastrointestinal symptoms like constipation, bloating, maybe even diarrhea, and then just feeling nauseous after fatty foods or getting even sometimes reflux after fatty foods. And then your bowels are a really good indicator of gallbladder and liver issues. And I really do use my bowels to this day to still kind of assess like, okay, if my gallbladder is struggling a bit, I can usually kind of tell because the clay colored stool, the sticky stool, all that stuff, the bile dumping starts to come back. So bowels are kind of a good indication to catch of like when the gallbladder or liver are a little bit more stressed.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think our stool can tell us so much about our health. And I love that you mentioned those sticky, floaty, light colored stools. This is going to be a big red flag for people. Um, with that fat malabsorption, fat intolerance, we do know that we do need fat as human beings. And so if you are finding that you have fat malabsorption or intolerance to fat, what is something that you can do about that? Do you recommend a low fat diet? Do you recommend supporting that, and to how do you overcome that?
Yeah, so to work on fat malabsorption symptoms, it really stems in the bile that's being produced by your liver and bile flow. So, your liver produces a substance called bile, and bile is very important for fat digestion, but it also is a form of detoxification. It helps bind to different toxins, excess estrogen, help pulls it out through your stool if you're having regular bowel movements. It also helps protect a healthy gut microbiome, supports cholesterol metabolism and absorption of your fat soluble vitamins. And then that bile, if the gallbladder is there, passes to the gallbladder, and the gallbladder holds that bile and it will secrete it when we eat meals with fats. So the gallbladder liver work together to control the substance of bile and making sure that it releases out. So that way, then we are digesting our fats well. So when someone has intolerance to fats, typically we want to work on strategies to target these two organs, but also that bile, the bile composition and bile flow. So there's a lot you can do as far as diet and supplements to stimulate the bile in a safe manner, but it really does long term to fix the problem. It really does work on, or really does involve a lot of strategies that target your liver and your gallbladder function or contraction. Low fat diets, I typically don't recommend to individuals unless their gallbladder is reactive or sensitive, meaning that they're having a lot of frequent gallbladder attacks. We will temporarily suggest a low fat diet just to give the individual a break. Um, and then after that, we work on increasing gallbladder liver support and we work on bile flow, and that helps to improve the intolerance to fats typically. And again, there's a lot you can do within the diet and lifestyle to kind of help stimulate the bile. But sometimes improvement of the bile composition goes a little bit further outside of diet and lifestyle because there's a lot of factors that can disrupt that process. And, gallbladder issues are often a liver issue. And so we have to consider that when we're talking about improving fat malabsorption and improvement of liver health. It can be sometimes other factors like hormonal fluctuations or being inundated with toxins and our body's not releasing them out. All of these can lead to poor bile composition, poor bile flow. So sometimes it goes beyond diet and lifestyle, but certainly the diet can be a huge pivotal piece that helps tremendously, and some targeted supplements too.
I know you have a podcast called The Gallbladder Diet. Can you give us a little bit more of a deep dive of what some of those beneficial foods might be to support?
Yes. And I just started the gallbladder diet. So I have only a couple podcasts, but it's been really fun doing it. So foods that improve your gallbladder, liver, or the bile composition, the number one that I think helps most people is bitter foods. And bitter foods are not something that's typical in most people's diet. But you might find that if you do have a gallbladder liver problem, you might kind of be like, oh, these are good, or you start to crave them a bit. Those are things like radish, radicchio, dandelion root tea, lemon, apple cider vinegar. These can really help improve intolerance to fat. So when someone's starting to struggle, the first thing I look at is like, okay, are they incorporating bitters? Whether it's through herbal teas, like bitter teas before meals, or doing bitters in the diet. I usually suggest to most people, like, you, if your gallbladder is sensitive, you're reacting, you typically need close to 2 servings of bitter foods a day. Even just simply doing lemon water or apple cider vinegar in water before meals helps tremendously. And then starting your morning with like a bitter tea. So something like dandelion and artichoke and lemon combination. And I'm coming out with a bioflow tea that it helps a ton to kind of kickstart your digestion, but specifically target the bile, especially if you notice it kind of sluggish. So I would say the bitter foods when you're struggling with fat intolerance really can help move the needle and help to reduce down the sensitivity pretty quick.
Sometimes people can have gallbladder issues that present as diarrhea and sometimes constipation. I know that there's something called bile acid malabsorption. Does that relate to gallbladder issues as well in some cases?
It can. And you see that common when I would say an individual just had a gallbladder attack and the bile is just going through quickly. Sometimes people have bile dumping right before gallbladder attack. So that can be sometimes indications that the attack is starting. After gallbladder attacks, people fluctuate between diarrhea, constipation. When there's a function problem, so whether it's a hyperkinetic gallbladder or biliary dyskinesia or poor gallbladder functions present, that bile is not being controlled properly because there's issues with the contraction. And that can certainly lead to bile acid, diarrhea, or malabsorption. And then after gallbladder surgery, I would say it becomes, for some individuals, unfortunately, worse. And sometimes it can be a structural thing due to the changes in your digestion of no longer having your gallbladder there, which was the regulator for your bile. It can sometimes certainly be related to that. But sometimes what I have to find with individuals post gallbladder surgery struggling with that diarrhea, bile dumping, bile acid diarrhea, there's typically other factors going on between their gut health, through their digestive health, even thyroid, their liver. All these things can also affect the motility and kind of speed things up if they are having that excess bile getting dumped.
Would the same kind of bitter foods be helpful for that? Because I know a lot of times it seems like no matter what the gallbladder is doing, the answer from conventional medicine seems to be surgery, right? It's like, have it removed. So I'm just curious about your thoughts on whether the same gallbladder diet might be able to help with that.
Yeah, it does actually. A lot of people that, especially post surgery, that are dealing with bile acid diarrhea or diarrhea, they're often scared to do bile stimulation. But you have to take into account that sometimes bile diarrhea is a liver issue. And so, especially in individuals post gallbladder removal. And so, those bitter foods also have an action on the liver. Certainly, teas like dandelion root tea, I wouldn't go in with that, but I would use certain foods to really help support this. So, using those bitter foods in the diet. And for a lot of people with bile acid diarrhea, especially post gallbladder removal, they tend to struggle with more fiber. And so, bringing in these bitter foods can actually be a way to help get them in those nutrients and start to work on their liver.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Why do you think gallbladder issues are so rampant? Why do you think they're so common these days?
Oh, there's a lot. I would say the number one thing that we're starting to see, there's two. Top two things is one, the rise of metabolic issues, the rise of like insulin resistance. There's a big connection. Insulin resistance is a big driver of gallbladder and fatty liver. It's one of the main drivers because it produces, what will happen is it will cause the liver to basically have a buildup of fat and cause fatty liver. Or we have issues with the gallbladder where the insulin will cause cholesterol supersaturation in the bile. And anytime we have cholesterol supersaturation in the bile produced by the liver, so basically your liver is not able to do all its functions and it's creating a bile that's too thick, we have a high risk of gallstones. But insulin resistance can also mess with the gallbladder function. So there's a huge metabolic issue that is increasing the risk of gallbladder and fatty liver disease. And unfortunately, you're also seeing this be a rise with a lot of children because of the foods, a lot of the snack foods and stuff that the kids are that we have nowadays. That's a big one. And then I would say toxin overload. We are inundated with more toxins than ever from our food to environment. And this can really affect both these main detox organs, your gallbladder and your liver. And your liver is your main organ for detoxification. And anytime that the body accumulates more toxins than it's releasing out, it's obviously going to hit the liver pretty hard. And then you have your liver not able to process out the toxins, methylation slows down, and then we have the risk of sludgy bile affecting both the gallbladder and liver. So I would say those are the top two things that you're really starting to see an increase. And unfortunately, I think it's going to get worse because of that.
I see a lot of women with thyroid conditions. They do tend to have gallbladder issues. Can you explain that connection?
Yes. And this was a big issue for me too along my journey. It's kind of been up and down. It keeps coming back, but the thyroid can affect your gallbladder and liver. So there's a bidirectional relationship between the two, actually. So basically, to summarize it, your low thyroid function will affect how your gallbladder contracts. So for individuals that have poor gallbladder function or the diagnosis is biliary dyskinesia, usually there's an issue with the gallbladder not contracting well. And then you also have the thyroid coming in where it's causing a cholesterol supersaturation of bile. Again, that's where anytime that um, basically what low thyroid function, it'll drive that cholesterol supersaturation in the bile in the liver. And then you have the gallstone risk. And then with low thyroid function, in regards to contraction, typically hormone CCK production is weak. And hormone CCK specifically is a hormone that tells your gallbladder to contract. So when we have an issue of lower hormone CCK, the gallbladder contraction. And then also the thyroid can affect your sphincter of Oddi, which also regulates bile flow into the small intestine. So sometimes people that have a function problem, it can also be like a sphincter problem and gallbladder function. You see this in individuals post gallbladder surgeries that still kind of, especially that have removed their gallbladder and they had a function issue, they still have a lot of the presenting symptoms. And then fat or thyroid and your liver are connected too. So we know our liver is really important for thyroid conversion, but low thyroid hormone can also increase LDL, triglycerides, insulin resistance, which promote fat buildup in the liver. And the poor bile flow can also cause toxin accumulation. So whenever we have a fatty liver, we have an increased risk of gallstones. And then the other scenario is that if our gallbladder and liver are not functioning well, we know that a lot of our thyroid hormone converts in the liver. So we have an issue there. But poor bile flow between these two organs will also affect thyroid conversion, promote toxin buildup, and deficiencies of nutrients needed for thyroid hormone support can also affect our gut microbiome, which can affect your thyroid. So it really is a connection that's really important that I think is a big miss with most people when they're diagnosed with gallbladder issues is not addressing their thyroid or their hormone health, especially among females.
Yeah, I see fatty liver disease is something that women with thyroid issues also have more commonly. And I've also found that just majority of my clients with Hashimoto's, they even without abnormal, I guess, liver labs, they still benefit from doing some liver support. In fact, it was one of the first protocols in my book, Hashimoto's Protocol. I came across this protocol on accident when I had some clients that just really weren't getting better with things. And I thought maybe, it seems like they have a lot of toxicity issues going on within their bodies. And sure enough, supporting their liver and gallbladder, they started to feel so much better in just a couple of weeks. And a lot of times people will come to me and they'll say, like, oh, I don't have my liver enzymes are normal, right? So it can't be my liver, but I just find supporting their pathways can be very helpful. Now, there's also signs that people might have a fatty liver even without their liver enzymes being abnormal. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, certainly. So, fatty liver, that's kind of the issue with it, right? Is that sometimes, people aren't doing ultrasounds or fibroscans until the enzymes elevate. And this can be an issue because obviously we want to catch fatty liver as soon as possible because it's easier to reverse. So, before the enzymes elevate, there can be signs that possibly your liver is struggling or there's a possibility of fatty liver without the enzymes being elevated. So we can look at blood work. So high triglycerides, low HDL, high LDL are signs of liver congestion. And there's poor cholesterol to triglyceride ratio that often is linked to poor bile flow. We have elevated CRP levels that are indication of inflammation. We have low total T3, reverse T3 with elevated liver enzymes that can be signs of fatty liver and GGT. Insulin resistance is one of the number one drivers of liver dysfunction. So any elevation of hemoglobin A1C, glucose, insulin, high triglycerides are all signs of insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. And then you have the high risk of fatty liver. And then because your liver controls over 500 plus functions in the body, um, that there can be other issues of like the nausea, intolerance to fats, our bowel movements, so light or clay colored stools, waking up between 1 to 3 a.m. Fatigue is a really early indication of fatty liver, PMS, thyroid issues, blood sugar issues, unexplained anxiety. These can all be signs that our liver is under stress. And if you catch these early enough, then you can really start to work on the reversal of fatty liver. And I tell you, I say my gallbladder liver journey has been the best one yet because um, I really do feel like outside of the gut, the liver is a foundational piece when it comes to your health. And if you have any hormone issue or any health issue in general, we really do need to work on your liver health because it can help tremendously in so many ways. And that's why I say it's like my best blessing because I have felt so much healthier since going on this journey.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Would you recommend? I know I did an Ezra.
So an Ezra scan. So with an ultrasound, yes, you can certainly start with an ultrasound. And then if it shows fatty liver, typically you want to follow up with a fibro scan to get the more accurate report of the liver to see where the scarring's at. And that you can typically request from like a gastroenterologist.
Thank you so much for sharing that because I know a lot of times people get blood work and they're told everything looks normal. And sometimes it's just like, okay, well, we didn't actually do the right tests. And when you do the right tests, you can be really proactive about your health.
100%.
Can people reverse fatty liver? And what does that journey look like?
Yes. So the liver is an amazing organ that can repair and regenerate. As I mentioned, it's best to catch it earlier if you can, because then fatty liver has a higher chance to reverse quicker. If it's not addressed, it will progress to NASH or fibrosis. And NASH can take longer to reverse, but it can reverse. And for some individuals, it's all about kind of slowing down the progression of the disease too, before it hits cirrhosis. And then cirrhosis, obviously, you can't reverse. So it's all about prevention and supporting the liver. So the main things with fatty liver is it really is focused on your diet and lifestyle. It's reducing down the toxin overload. Now, the hard thing is, and this was a big eye opener for me too, when I was diagnosed with fatty liver, is that it goes beyond sometimes diet and lifestyle for people, especially nowadays, that sometimes it is a big component of toxin accumulation or there's the hormone piece going on. So, like for me, I was diagnosed with fatty liver during postpartum, and my thyroid was starting to have some issues around that time. So, it's a large piece of it. The foundation always starts with your diet and lifestyle. And then we need to, for some individuals, peel back the layers and work on some other factors between your gut health, if there's hormone issues, if for any reason there's environmental toxins going on, just toxin accumulation, poor methylation, all of these things can affect and drive that fatty liver.
What are some of the toxins that you're speaking to?
Toxins can be from our food, it can be from endotoxins. So this is where like the connection between your gut and liver. It can be from mycotoxins, from mold, and I would say just overburden of toxins because it will start to slow down methylation. And that whenever methylation is impaired, we have that higher risk to develop fatty liver and gallbladder issues.
I know a lot of times people recommend choline for fatty liver. Is that one of the supplements that you might recommend as well?
Yeah, so choline is really important for both gallbladder liver health because it supports fat metabolism, bile composition, and it prevents fat buildup in the liver. So we do want to ensure we get choline within the diet, which is mostly found in obviously eggs. Now, eggs can be a trigger food for some people with gallbladder issues. So this is where you have to caution with it. But I do typically suggest when someone is working on reversal of fatty liver or working on saving their gallbladder, we do typically supplement with choline. So whether it's in the form of like phosphatidylcholine, or there's another form that typically we use is choline CDP. Our body can absorb that a bit better and help support the gallbladder liver.
So, in addition to choline, are there other supplements that might recommend to support people through this process?
Yes. So the supplements can be a lot for gallbladder liver health. So I'm going to try to cover them as best as possible. So the other one that would say is probably the most helpful are bile salts. So we have ox bile and TUDCA. Ox bile is a different form of bile salt that will help aid in fat intolerance. So, whether your gallbladder is poor functioning, maybe you're struggling with fat sensitivity or dealing with a lot of gallbladder attacks, your bile flow is impaired, ox bile can be very helpful. And then, same thing if post gallbladder surgery, you're struggling with intolerance to fats, maybe more constipation, deficiencies in fat soluble vitamins, then you can certainly use ox bile to help support that fat digestion. TUDCA is another form of bile salt that specifically really promotes bile flow. It'll support fat digestion, but it has strong actions on the liver. So there's a lot of research that shows it can help with reduction of liver enzymes and reversal of fatty liver. So TUDCA can be beneficial for individuals that have gallstones, sludge, poor gallbladder function, or even post gallbladder surgery where their liver needs some more support. Then we can go in with TUDCA. The bile salts do have to be individualized. Sometimes people have different sensitivities. We all have our own bile pool. So you do have to individualize these supplements. So the bile salts, choline, ensuring you're getting amino acids, those I prioritize within the diet. So that the amino acids support detoxification, bile acid conjugation. Fiber is really important. Again, first prioritize within your diet, but then you may typically, most individuals do find benefit of supplementing with fiber. And so I'll often do a combination of acacia fiber, partially hydrolyzed gorgum sun fiber, and psyllium seed husk. Fiber acts as a natural binder to bind to different toxins, excess estrogen, and cholesterol. And if we're having regular bowel movements, it helps pull it out. Then we have magnesium. Magnesium is a very important mineral that plays over many different functions in the body, but it also supports detoxification. So, phase 2 liver detoxification, synthesis of glutathione. And without adequate amount, you'll see more toxin accumulation. Zinc is another mineral that you can use to support liver function, liver enzymes. Potassium is another important mineral that helps support detoxification, digestion, and bile secretion. So it's also essential for thyroid health to help improve uptake of thyroid hormone. And it can support blood sugar regulation and insulin resistance. So potassium has a lot of actions for your gallbladder liver. So these minerals we should prioritize within the diet, but for some individuals, supplementing with them can also be helpful. And then I personally love herbal medicine. I found a lot of benefit using herbs through my journey. And so there's two different types of herbs that you can use. And one is called a choleretic, which has actions on the liver and bile production. So an example of this would be milk thistle. And then we have cholagogues, which stimulate bile secretion from your gallbladder. And so, an examples of this would be dandelion and artichoke. And so we can use a combination of both of these. Now, if your gallbladder is sensitive, sometimes the cholagogue herbs are best to hold off and only use choleretic herbs like milk thistle until your gallbladder calms down. And then you can start to go in and push the bile flow a lot more. But I would say those are kind of the top priority. And then certainly, there's a lot of other supplements that you can target to hit your liver more. B vitamins also are very essential for liver, gallbladder health, improving bile composition. So whether you supplement a B complex or if you do individual B vitamins with their cofactors, it's up to you. But your B vitamins are typically also really important. And the one thing that we just watch with most individuals with gallbladder liver issues is selecting forms that have methylfolate or folinic acid for people that have sensitivities to methylfolate.
Thank you so much for that. Do you think a lot of times fatty liver can be reversed?
I do, yes, yeah. And you do see it quite often. But it does need to, I think there's some misconception that's not a big deal. And it is a big deal because your liver has so many actions or functions in the body. And so we need to consider it a big deal. But unfortunately, some individuals in the medical community don't deem it that important, or often will say, well, everybody has a fatty liver. And so then it seems like it's not a big deal, but it is, especially if it continues to progress. And like I said, because it has over 500 plus functions in your body, when your liver is fatty, it's not functioning properly, you're going to struggle with more metabolic issues, thyroid issues, your immunity is going to be weak, you're going to deal with digestive problems. And so that's why your liver really is a foundational piece when it comes to your health.
We talked a lot about treatment options. So if you have a issue with your gallbladder, you don't necessarily need to get it removed. Maybe you can try some of these lifestyle changes and supplements. If you've got fatty liver, you can also go down the lifestyle change and supplement route, work with a qualified practitioner like yourself to get yourself on the right path. What about people who are like, "Oh, I'm listening to this now, but I've already had my gallbladder removed." What are your recommendations for them to how do they support themselves at this point?
Yes. So the top three things I typically work on with individuals post gallbladder removal is their diet, their digestion, so making sure fat digestion is optimized, and their liver health is supported. Because we know gallbladder surgery changes the physiology of your digestion, specifically around fat digestion. And if we aren't digesting, absorbing our fats well, this is going to lead to a whole host of digestive issues, deficiencies in fat soluble vitamins. This can also affect your thyroid because we're not absorbing our fats well. It can affect your blood sugar. And so we look at the digestion as a foundational piece. And then the liver takes on added stress without the gallbladder. So without the gallbladder, your liver will continuously produce the bile, but it's no longer controlled. And so it'll constantly drip into your intestines. And so the liver over time, the change in the bile can affect the liver in multiple ways. One, we lead to, again, toxin buildup. So if someone is dealing with constipation, let's say, because they have that loss of concentrated bile, they're going to lean more constipated and toxin accumulation, or even individuals that struggle with more bile dumping or bile acid diarrhea. This can irritate the intestines quite a bit, affect the gut microbiome, which can affect the liver. So for individuals post gallbladder surgery, we have to start with the basics and just work on a diet. And so I usually tell, and a lot of people are often confused, like, I don't know what to eat after gallbladder surgery because maybe they're dealing with a lot of food sensitivities. And so I usually just encourage them to focus in on key nutrients within the diet to support your liver and start to increase those a ton, and then work on supporting your digestion. And this has to be individualized because it can depend on what's going on in the individual. If they're hypersensitive to so many supplements, which is common, you can't just throw bile salts on them, and often they're reactive to it. So you have to individualize these functional digestive supplements. So digestive enzymes, beta HCl or apple cider vinegar or oxbile or TEDCA. These are all methods that can support fat digestion, but they do have to be individualized.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like it's such a common condition, but most practitioners aren't recommending to support yourself after having your gallbladder removed. It's just sort of like, okay, it's gone. Go on with your life, right?
Yep. Unfortunately, yes. Most that I think that's the biggest issue and why people struggle after gallbladder surgery is because it's deemed as like a no big deal surgery. And then two, a lot of people are told you can eat whatever you want after surgery. They're not educated on the fact that their digestion's different, and this can have a downstream effect on their whole body. And that's the biggest problem. And that's why, like, I try to really emphasize with people post gallbladder surgery, even though they say, I'm doing great. Well, it's like, great. I'm glad you're doing good, but you need to work on these things still. It's really important because if not, sometimes some of this stuff can come up like months to years later. You're talking like 15 to 20 years later, you'll start to hear people complain about some of these issues.
Yeah. And a lot of times I find women will start having hormonal issues after getting their gallbladders removed. It's like something that they didn't maybe have before, or perhaps it got exacerbated.
Totally.
Are there any myths about gallbladder or fatty liver health that you would like to bust?
Yes. So, on the topic of surgery, one is that you can eat whatever you want after gallbladder removal. Definitely, everyone's diet can be different. So, this can mean different for everybody. But it is once our gallbladder is removed, we still want to maintain a health promoting diet because your liver will take on added stress without the gallbladder. And so, if we don't support the liver, then that's where a lot of these issues can start to come up. Low fat diets save your gallbladder. No, I'm gonna say they don't. They can be super supportive when the gallbladder is reactive, when it's sensitive, when you're dealing with chronic gallbladder attacks, when it's inflamed. Low fat diets are a very helpful tool, but you should not remain on a low fat diet forever. Whether you are working to save your gallbladder or post gallbladder removal, we need to work on the issue, which often is an issue with bile flow and poor fat digestion. Another one is genetics are the main driver of gallbladder problems. So I hear this all the time. I have gallbladder issues because my mother did. I had gallbladder issues because my father did. Certainly genetics are a big driver of gallbladder problems, but our individual diet and lifestyle choices over the years turn on these genetics. So this is only a small piece to the puzzle, and we do need to look at our choices too when we're considering our gallbladder diagnosis and what led to it in the first place. And then the last one, like I said, is fatty liver is no big deal. It is a big deal and it does need to be considered. And it is really important. And the quicker you work on it, the better you'll be. And I promise you'll feel a lot better when you can reverse the fatty liver and learn to support your liver health.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I know people are listening are going to be wondering how they can learn more about your work and where to connect with you. Could you give us that information?
Yes. So I'm mostly on Instagram at gallbladder.nutritionist. I have started a podcast, only a couple episodes so far, but it is called The Gallbladder Diet. And then you can connect with me on my website, gallbladderdiet.com.
Thank you so much. And you also have a downloadable resource for our community. I'm going to put the link in the show notes. Can you tell us a little bit about that resource?
Yes. So I have different master classes. And so I believe the one I shared with you may be a master class, if I remember. But yes, so I love to do master classes. So a lot of my free resources you'll find on my page are around different just free master classes on common topics.
So, the link you gave us is how to reverse digestive issues, fatty liver, and metabolic challenges with no gallbladder. Thank you so much for creating this free training. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Before I let you go, I wanted to kind of put you on the spot and ask you some fun rapid fire questions. My first question is: are there any wellness hacks that you refuse to participate in?
I'm not ready for that one. I'm trying to think. Um, no, I would. No, I push my body, I'll be honest with you. So if someone tells me sometimes things are beneficial, sometimes I'll do them. So I can't think of any right now that I would avoid.
Yeah, I mean, it's like some people will try anything once, and some people are like, This is a definite no for me." So it all depends on us.
I would say, okay, one thing, I will never do a juice cleanse. I just to live off juices every day forever, whatever, if it's like 5 to 7 days, it's not for me. I don't want to do it. I don't know if that's considered wellness hack, but
Yeah, I tried one of those, but then, like, halfway through, there was, like, a pig roast happening in my neighborhood, and I got Facebook ads for it, and I was like, "Oh, I guess this is, like, a sign from the universe that I'm not meant to do this." And I was so hungry during the process. I don't know that I saw any benefit. Are there any outlandish things you've tried for your health? Like, some really weird stuff that you look back on and people might be like, "Oh, that's interesting."
there's certainly things that people don't feel comfortable with. So I love colonics. I love enemas. I know with clients, those are kind of the things that people typically are the last detox tools they'll try because it's just scary. It's uncomfortable. And they're like, my husband still makes comments about asking me how I do enemas every time. But I would say those, but outside of that, I can't think of anything else extreme. But what it's just getting over the hurdle to do those. And once you do them, you do become kind of addicted to they just are they you do feel a lot of benefit from them.
What are some of the benefits you've seen?
Oh, my skin. So like after colonics, my skin and my eyes, that how clear they become after is amazing. Um, the my hormones, doing the enemas, I have noticed the biggest change with my hormones, especially with like my estrogen levels. Um, I would say those because I typically have always leaned more constipated because of dealing with thyroid problems. That anything that deals with clearing out my bowels and my colon and everything, just you just feel so much better, right? From the inside out, because that the stuff's not sitting in you anymore. And it can get really frustrating when you do all this stuff for constipation and it's still not improving, that using these tools just are something benefit to do on occasion. I'm not saying do them all the time because obviously it can mess with your bowels, but and the motility, but on occasion they can be really nice.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that this is probably a no on some people's list, but then other people might be curious and want to know how they could benefit from something like that. Um, if you had the supplement police come to your house and say, "We're going to take all of your supplements, you could keep one," which supplement would you keep?
So for me, I have a low functioning gallbladder. And so I have found the most benefit using ox bile in my situation. And so I would say my ox bile would be pretty sad if I didn't have it. I don't know if this is considered a supplement, but apple cider vinegar, I would take that everywhere with me.
And how do you use apple cider vinegar?
I use it before meals. I'll use it if my gallbladder starts to get sensitive. So it's really powerful for gallbladder attacks and intolerances to fats. And it's typically more gentle. So, yeah, I've used it even for like blood sugar issues. Intolerances after meals, before meals, you name it. I've added just many different things. So it's been a very important piece on my gallbladder journey that I would be very sad if I didn't have it.
Do you put a teaspoon in a cup of water? Is that how you typically use it?
Yeah, I'll add it just to water. Sometimes I do it with my herbal teas.
What about gummies? What do you think of the apple cider vinegar gummies?
I don't think they have the same effect as just drinking it straight. I get asked this question all the time because most people are like, I don't want to drink apple cider vinegar. And if you're using apple cider vinegar for gallbladder attacks, it's not going to be the same for using gummies. And then personally, I don't know if you know of any, but I haven't found any good apple cider vinegar gummies on the market that are a high concentration and low sugar. It seems to be that there's usually issues there. So I tell people just plug your nose and you got to drink it, especially if you're using it for attacks.
Yeah, so sometimes, like, gummies are much easier to take and tastier to take. Sometimes we just have to do our regular supplements or the medicinal stuff that doesn't taste as good, right?
Yes, as long as it stops gallbladder pain, I'm for it.
Do you have any guilty pleasures that maybe aren't like nutritionist approved?
My guilty pleasure, I love French pastries. I would say that. I got in a habit during postpartum where, like, every Sunday we would go to a coffee shop and I'd get like a French pastry. And I think this was part of the problem of why I also got fatty liver postpartum. But yeah, that was one that I introduced postpartum that, like, something to do with the stress and everything. It was just so comforting. But I definitely paid the price for that one.
Oh man, yeah, I heard like French pastries have negative calories, right? As long as they're prepared properly, or maybe if they're eaten in France.
Yeah, I don't think this one was prepared properly, but I call it a French pastry because it was like a French bakery. But I can tell you is a lot thicker, more bready compared to what you get. Um, so I do know there's a little bit of difference and definitely probably more sugar in ours.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of times people find that they can go to Europe and whatever is it because of all the walking they're doing or just the less toxic foods or perhaps the proteins are a little bit different inside of like the gluten or wheat products that they just tend to do better with that. And so it can be quite a challenge in the States. I know some people will come to the US and they'll say, "Really? I can't eat American bread. What's going on here?" I'm sorry to hear that the French pastries were not neutral for your liver either.
No.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join me on my podcast. I think this has been a really incredible conversation. And everybody listening, I hope this conversation can be helpful to you on your healing journey. Until